Let's get into it. Sold Not For Sale podcast. Coach Colin here. We got Joe Rogan making fun of Douglas Murray, his worst guest ever. And the liberals are fuming over this whole thing. You have to see this. If you don't know what I'm talking about things like this.
Look, this new media podcast world is in a serious state of crisis right now. And it's actually because of this new woke right uprising we're seeing and not the woke left.
By the way, how are you
Oh, very, very upset. This guy dropped his soy glass as Joe Rogan was making fun of Douglas Murray. Psh! And he was like, there is something seriously wrong with this new medium, and I have to tell the whole world about it. And I appreciate it, because now I get to tell the whole world about it as well. But we will get back to that. But there is something going on with Joe Rogan and his podcast ever since, I don't really know when, but Douglas Murray was a sign, and now it seems like there's this weird attack going on Joe Rogan. Doesn't really make sense. We'll talk a little bit about that. I'm going to jump over to this Joe Rogan clip, and then after all that, I think just for no reason at all, I'm just going to talk about Carmelo Anthony and just say what I think about that. Because Joe hasn't, and I don't know that he will. So I want to talk about it a little bit. But let's get into this first.
Better counseling.
That's right.
That's all it is.
That's right.
And they need to heal. They need to get into space.
Well,
maybe
show
they need to
that
take that
woman,
lady instead of putting her in jail.
Yeah.
Maybe throw her in space.
Show
real
that
quick.
woman, Katy Perry.
Her and Amy Schumer up at a
Everyone
satellite.
should go up. I'll do it. Me, Amy Schumer, and Meghan Markle in space. That's a show. It's an 11-minute show.
What about Meghan McCain? Would you do it with her?
I would absolutely do it. All of us together. You know, why not?
I'd watch that.
Of course.
I'd watch that. And
As
if they
you
called
should.
it my son's pussy, then justice will be served.
Absolutely. Do you do a big Easter thing?
What do you mean?
Just, I don't know. Is it a big, do you do like
my family?
eggs? Yeah. No.
Well, the kids are in high school now.
Yeah,
It's a
right.
little different.
Right.
And they're, you know,
You're not dying
that's
eggs.
just money in those plastic eggs.
Yeah, that's a
They're
good
not gonna
point.
work
Nobody
for 'em.
cares anymore. Yeah, they want money in the
There's
egg.
candy
that's a
in the
good
house.
point. Yeah, I remember that's the thing. When you get older, it's just money. It's just money. Just
Well,
take
once
money.
the kids realize that there's no magic person that's delivering,
Then it's all bullshit. Just
Yeah.
give me money in the egg.
it's like, oh, it's my parents. Because
That's right.
otherwise they would say, that's weird that Santa's so much nicer to me than he is to those poor people.
Of course.
I guess I'm chosen.
Of course.
That's a weird thing to say to kids.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, you got everything on the list, but that kid that gets bussed in from the bad neighborhoods, he got
Yeah.
nothing.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point. But, you know, kids go, Santa's fickle. Santa likes what he likes. He likes the suburbs. Santa likes landing his sled in the burbs.
He does.
He feels better about it.
It feels
And,
really
you know,
good visiting rich people.
Yeah.
And he doesn't even talk to the Jews.
No, he's not. He knows.
Weird.
He knows. He does his thing.
But, you know, if they're the chosen people, why don't they get Santa Claus visits?
Well, they have other things.
Yeah, but their other thing, like, it wasn't really supposed to be a bunch of gifts until the
Yeah.
Christians started getting all the Santa Claus gifts, and the Jewish kids are like, what the f*** is going on, Mom?
And some of them cheat. Some of them do a little Christmas too.
Some of them have a tree.
Some of them do a little Christmas.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Some of them
Why
do a little
not?
Christmas. Hopefully they do this
It's
peace.
fun.
This peace in the Middle East. Hopefully, they keep talking about all this. You know, these deals they're all making. Hopefully that the Hamas and the Israel, whatever it is, they get. You know, because
Well, that's
Hey.
one thing that Trump said. If I get in there, 24 hours, the war's
yeah,
over.
that's a tough one. 24 is tough.
That's obviously.
But
not
hopefully
happening.
they figure it out because it is. It's unfortunate.
Yeah, it's fucking crazy.
The human toll is unreal.
Unreal.
And you know, it's crazy.
Some lady just died. She was the protagonist in some documentary, and she just got blown up.
There is an argument to be made that level of devastation and death is worse than you talking to someone on your podcast.
Allegedly.
There is an argument to be made. It's probably not a good one.
The amount
but there
of damage
is an
you can do
argument.
with just talking.
There is an argument to be made that, you know, starvation and stuff like that and people dying is worse than a podcast.
But wait a minute.
I wouldn't
Wait
make
a minute
it.
before you say that. Have you been there?
Right, that's a good point.
Have you haven't been?
By the way, how is he in all these wars? Can I just go to wars? By the way, how are you allowed to just go to wars Is that the way
you should at least
can you just
have the
go to
courtesy of going?
Can I just go to wars, or do I have to come back and say what people want me to say about the wars? Can I go to the wars and have my own opinions, or do I have to have the opinions?
Not if you want to go back.
That's right. That's right. It's very interesting, this war tourism. How do I get on this war tourism?
Yeah.
I'd like to go to the Ukraine. I
you
want to
should go.
I want to go. I want to go to all this war tourism.
Do you have any awards that they can melt down and make bullets out of?
Joe, think about this. Do I seem like a guy that has a lot of awards?
Didn't you get one of those YouTube plaques when you hit 100,000?
I don't even know where they send it. I don't know where. I don't know where they're sending those YouTube plaques.
We've got a few of those.
But I like this idea
We'll
of
give you
war
one of ours.
tourism.
You can
I like
send
the idea of going to a war and then coming back, having a very black and white view.
Yes, I've been there.
I get it, and I know, and interesting. Okay, I like that.
Yeah.
I like that. I love that.
You feel better than the other people.
Well, of
because you
course,
just say
there's
you've
a
been
lot
there.
of people. It gets very murky. Most people I know that have been to war have a very murky, complex view of things. But it is good to go to a war and then come back and be as sure as you were before you came.
You don't have to go for very long.
No, you go for an hour.
Couple hours.
It's a lunch.
Yeah.
It's lunch on
Put
the
on
front
a
line.
flak jacket that says press.
Tea on the front lines, and then you come back and you have all the talking. Yeah.
Yeah. And if you're on the right side, you probably
Right.
don't get shot.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Well, there doesn't seem to be a ton of danger for a lot of these people going to these wars. They seem fine.
If you cross that line
Yeah.
and you have a bucket of food with you,
Yeah.
they might light you up.
Yeah. No, I'm gonna go. I'll go to any war and I'll anything you want. So if you want to pay for me to go to a war, I will come back and I go, I saw the Houthis. They're terrifying. They are terrifying. Any war you want. And by the way, any country, if China wants me to, I'm doing it. I'm
You go to
doing it.
Moscow?
I would love to go to Moscow. And I said to my friend, Anna Hoshin from the Red Scare podcast, I said, should I go to Russia? She goes, you're spiritually Russian and the maybe you won't leave. She says, the oligarch lifestyle might be for you.
I can see
The
you eating
sweatsuits,
caviar
the
with flip
smoked
flops.
fish. She goes, it might smoking a cigarette on a yacht. She goes, it might be for you. Listening to people's moral justifications for all kinds of things. Going, well,
I see
I
your
get
point.
it.
I get it.
Yeah,
I mean, what else are you going to do?
yeah, for sure.
Yeah. What happened to all those yachts that got confiscated?
I don't know.
Who
It's a great
gets
question.
those?
I bet it's some high level version of like a police auto auction, right?
Right.
Yeah, for sure.
That's what I'm thinking. Exactly. Like if the
Maybe
cops,
those are the ones you sail to the war. I don't know.
yeah, when they raid drug dealers' houses and they get those Maseratis, you could buy that Maserati online.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what those yachts are. It's a great question. What happens to those yachts?
Yeah,
those
because-
very luxurious. That was the first problem I had. Obviously, it's a tragedy, the whole Ukraine war. But I thought, frankly, going around and taking these oligarchs' boats, I was against that.
What's weird?
You work hard for a boat like that.
Also, how do you know how much they had involved in the Russian government's decision?
They
Like,
probably had
what did
nothing.
they
A
do?
lot of them had nothing to do. They just earned money in Russia, and they were like, "All right, we're going to sanction everybody. We're going to confiscate everything." And it's like, okay,
But do you think that it was done so that they could make some sort of a rebellion amongst the oligarchs against Putin? Like show them that they're getting hurt?
It could be. I think that there was a decision made at some point to not try to end this. They did not. I don't think they wanted to end this quickly. There was a decision made to bleed the Russian military and isolate Russia and try to use this as a way to drain the power and resources of Russia.
And you think that by capturing these yachts, it creates like internal turmoil?
Not only internal turmoil, but you're now limiting, the ability of these incredibly wealthy people to earn money in countries. You're destroying economic realities and then you're saying to these people, okay, go figure it out. It's what we said to Russia, but they did, right? They got closer to China. They got closer to Brazil. They traded with India. They started an industrial economy. They started producing their own, munitions and things like that. So they were able to kind of start to weirdly build out this middle class. This was the worst. I think it's the worst thing. If you don't want a country to keep invading other countries, you certainly wouldn't put them in the position to be stronger while they were doing it.
Yeah, it's all very weird too, with like the killing of that pipeline.
Yeah.
Like, aren't more people reliant now on Russian energy because of that?
The reason I played that last part, right, after he made fun of Douglas Murray and they were talking about him being allowed into wars, is because doesn't that last part where they're just talking about Russia and oligarchs and what happened there and taking the boats, and doesn't that seem normal? Isn't that a normal conversation? You know, because anytime we talk about Douglas, we have to talk about the fact that people, and now Joe Rogan's podcast, because now there's people attacking the fact that he just has these conversations. But doesn't that conversation seem normal? Isn't it normal to have conversations with your friends and not exactly be experts, but to have thoughts and opinions on it? It's a very normal thing. And for some reason, right now, a month after Joe Rogan has talked to Daryl Cooper, which didn't even seem like a big problem to me. I mean, the guy's he just gets deep into history. That's all. You know, I get deep into this podcast. I get deep into, a bunch of stuff that Trump's doing on my other channel. People just get deep into things and they talk about it. I don't get what the problem is, but now all of a sudden they're trying to unearth this whole thing that there's a big problem. I'm going to go back to that clip, but before I do, I just noticed something that Ian Carroll wrote here. And he was talking about, he goes, I wonder how much money's being spent on the anti-Rogan campaign this last week. Have you noticed hundreds of little and medium accounts are all parroting the same message and sharing the same clip? Cute, they think it will do anything. And I started noticing, I'm like, yeah, he's right. There is something going on there where people are trying to kind of push this narrative onto Joe Rogan that the way that he has always had his conversations, always done his podcasts, has now become a big problem. I think the only real problem is that we're starting to see that there's power. So I'm going to show the soy boy first and have him say his little spiel about how he feels. And then we're going to go to Michael Rapaort. And as you can see from this clip, he is very happy. He is very, very happy in this clip. So, of course. And then we're going to jump over to Douglas Murray himself, who actually speaks about being on the Joe Rogan podcast. Very interesting stuff. But let's start with Soy Boy here. He's very, very upset about what's going on in this new medium after hearing what Joe Rogan had to say about Tim Dillon. But really quick, Tim Dillon was talking about being allowed into wars. The reason that Douglas is allowed into wars is because he goes on the side, and listen, coincidence maybe, he goes on the side that the mainstream media seems to really agree with. He was in Ukraine. He was in that other place in the Middle East. And those people escort him to wherever. Then he does a photo op. He doesn't do much journalism, and he definitely doesn't talk to people on both sides of things like a journalist would, because a journalist would be impartial, right? They would just talk to everybody. He doesn't do that. He's escorted by one side. He sticks to that one side. And then he just looks over at the other side and then claims he's an expert from there. Now, I will say, I'll give him the credit of, great that you went there, I guess. But the fact that we're trying to have a conversation, a lot of people are trying to have a conversation that it's necessary for people like Joe Rogan to go to the places where, go to the places that you're going to talk about is just wildly insane. Wildly insane. But let's play the soy boy. He's very upset. Look at him here. I mean, he's in despair right now. So let's hear what he has to say.
Look, this new media podcast world is in a serious state of crisis right now. And it's actually because of this new woke right uprising we're seeing and not the woke left.
By the way, how are you allowed to just go to wars? Is that the way
you should at least
can you just
have the
go to
courtesy of going there.
Can I just go to wars, or do I have to come back and say what people want me to say about the wars?
Okay, so yeah, they're called war correspondents, and it's a profession. Journalists actually put years and years of experience and expertise into covering wars that break out across the world. This is the issue kind of with this new woke right type of culture that is exploding, is that they've been so demoralized. It's not just people on the political right. On the left is happening as well. They've been so demoralized that they become so anti-authority, whether it's the government, whether it's institutions, whether it's traditional or legacy, mainstream media. No one is to be trusted anymore if they have expertise, because if they have expertise, they must be part of a system. They must be part of the deep state. And now it's to be mocked. And to become a mockery now to actually have expertise in this day and age. And this is really, really scary.
Can I go to the war?
No. I thought he was going somewhere with that. When he said mock and then he said mockery, I'm like, this guy's tuned in. He's going to bring up Mockingbird, but he doesn't know about Mockingbird. Oh, he doesn't know about Operation Mockingbird. Okay. Well, then I understand. It's not just that people who have expertise are seen as... it's not that they're to be mocked. It's that they are a part of a system. That's 100% true. And it's not, and here's the other thing. It's not the fact that they have expertise. They're put in a position where it seems like they have expertise because of what they're willing to say on behalf of whatever dark entity is behind them. So that's really why expertise is getting looked at very sideways nowadays. It's not because experts are nonsense. That's not what it is. It's the fact that they'll seem like experts. For the longest time, how many people, and probably still do with mainstream media, they think Anderson Cooper is a journalist. They think Don Lemon is a journalist. They really... And on top of that, they'll think someone like Tucker Carlson is not a journalist. Someone like Glenn Greenwald is not a journalist. They'll say, oh, those are just those people on YouTube and the screens and whatnot. It's wild. It's very, very wild. So most experts, they don't really seem to have an immense expertise beyond, and I won't say anybody, but I'll say anybody who has a passion and enthusiasm for, X topic can go and get themselves. They can go on X, they can go on YouTube, they can read studies, they can see which studies work, they can follow a study, they can do all sorts of things and become experts. I don't like the fact that Dave Smith sits around and talks about these conflicts all the time and barely focuses in on what's really hurting Americans, but I respect it. And to act like he's not becoming some kind of expert in this whole thing, it's nonsense. You have to start somewhere to become an expert. But if you get co-opted or captured, then your credibility is in question. And yes, then we do not want to listen to you.
Or is it have my own opinions, or do I have to have the opinions?
Not if you want to go back.
That's right. It's very interesting, this war tourism. How do I get on this war tourism?
Yeah.
I'd like to go to the Ukraine. I want to go. I want to go. I want to go to all this war tourism.
So I want to be charitable and just point out that they are comedians. But the issue here is they're not actually trying to be funny. They're trying to be cynical. And this is...
Oh, whoa. Is he an expert? Hold on. Does he have a Netflix special? Hold on. I was just at the mothership. There's a whole bunch of open mics all across Texas. Okay? And I know quite a few comedians across the country and even in Canada. I haven't heard of this guy. Have you guys heard of this guy? What gives him the right to say whether or not... Have you even been to a comedy club? Have you been there? I mean, really? I thought you would have at least the respect, the audacity to not have written a tight 5-minute set. Have you no fart jokes? Have you no ball jokes? How do you know? How do you know what they're doing in regards to comedy? You see, that's where all this falls apart. What they're trying to do right now is make it so you can't talk. And that becomes very, very dangerous. I remember being told about how Cuba would work and how people would be afraid to have conversations in their houses because the police, these people like walking the beat, they would listen in the same way back in Prohibition. They would like look into your window to see if you're drinking or anything like that. These police would walk around and listen to conversations and listen around to hear what you're talking about. And if you're talking about the wrong thing, they go and scoop you up. Now, obviously, what this gentleman's talking and Douglas Murray's talking about, that's a far cry away from the police coming into your house. But the steps are being taken. Even if they're very light steps, even if they're very slight steps, this is still a very odd situation to try and push society into.
One of the main issues here with this new podcast comedic scene is that they're no longer funny. None of these podcasts or episodes are actually comedic anymore. They're just responding to politics in such a cynical way. And the sick irony here is the same people who demonized and attacked, even legitimately, the mainstream media over the last 10 years have become the new mainstream media. They have become exactly what they have criticized. And now they just do it in a decentralized way as grifters and algorithmic manipulation pushes them to the top with their cynical views and actual lack of expertise in anything that they politically commentate on a daily basis. Make no mistake about it, this new woke right creature has become exactly what it used to criticize. Self-righteous.
Woke right creature. And keep in mind, he's talking about Joe Rogan. So now he's saying Joe Rogan. Tim Dillon, whose new Netflix special is My Son's P Word. Yes, that P word. Those guys have become a part of the woke right because people like to listen to their podcasts and they could possibly have influence. And here's the thing. That's the root cause. The fact that they could have influence. And now all of a sudden these people are coming out of the woodwork like this is a big problem. This is a huge problem. You have some kind of power, you have some kind of influence, and now you have to do things the way that we would do things. That's exactly what Douglas was trying to put forward. He's like, there should be experts around. Sam Harris, there should be 2 journalists in the room with you. It's like, basically, it's like you should just open your legs up to the whole system that's been in place for so long. Be absorbed by the Project Mockingbird. Well, what are you waiting for? It's nonsense. Absolute nonsense. I'm going to have to do so much editing with this clip. Michael Rapaort, pissed off about Joe Rogan. Here we go.
But Joe Rogan be like, it's an open discussion. You know, we're just floating ideas. We're not married to them being facts or not facts, and they don't have to be experts. We're having a talk. We're just having a talk. I'm smoking a cigar. Sometimes I smoke weed. We're just talking. That's Joe Rogan's theory, and it's great for everything, except for facts.
You know, I have to stop it real quick. You know why that's so unfair? Because that's all Michael Rapaort has ever done. Ever. The fact, and this is why I say there's this weird, planned attack on Joe Rogan right now because of this issue. Because this is what Michael Rapaort does. He wasn't an expert on politics. He just really had a strong opinion about Donald Trump. That was it. And he had influence over people when he actually turned towards Donald Trump and said, you know what, I think I'm going to vote for Trump. But nobody stepped up and said, hey, you're not a political expert, shut your mouth. No one did that. It's very interesting. But as soon as something affects him, now all of a sudden it's not okay to just have a conversation. Very, very interesting.
It's great for everything except for people that are disparaging week after week, podcast after podcast, and not telling the truth and the reality of what has happened October 7th and beyond. So you bring on one scumbag after the next scumbag. And they say, well, I'm not an expert. I'm a comedian. I'm not an expert, but I know this. I'm not an expert on Hitler, but I'm not an expert on Churchill, but I'm not an expert on the conflict in the Middle East. But here's all of my thoughts. I'm a comedian, but we're not going to do any jokes. We're not going to talk comedy. I'm just going to expound on all my thoughts. Joe Rogan will have all these people come on and talk about history, Israel, Jews, genocide, and animosity. But if I came on Joe Rogan, I was like, Joe, I'm an MMA fan. I've never been in a ring. He would say, have you ever, like worked out MMA? No. But do I have to do it to be an expert? Do I have to actually spar MMA? Can't I just... It's my opinion. I've talked to some fighters, and my brother and I, we used to pillow fight. Joe, my brother would use the heavy pillow, and when he hit me with that heavy pillow a couple times, it hurt. So I know what it's like to get hit in the head. Not like by John Jones, but I know what it's like to get hit in the head. But Joe, listen, I'm thinking, because my brother, after we would have pillow fights, sometimes we would do the choke out game where I would let him choke me to sleep. And then he'd wake me up and I'd laugh and I'd be like, oh my God, that was so crazy. And then afterwards we'd continue fighting or wrestling or doing what we do. I think Joe Rogan.
Hey, you and your brother, hey, that's very weird, okay? Just gonna put it out there. The chokeout game, we didn't play that game. I have brothers too. We never played that game. It's very odd. Also didn't pillow fight. So, just putting it out there.
Yo, when these fighters get choked out, tap them awake, give them a standing 8 count. If they want to keep fighting, let them keep fighting. Wouldn't that be so exciting, Joe? Wouldn't the crowd go crazy if one fighter gets choked out, you give them a standing 8 count, then they come back and win? Joe Rogan would be like, what the are you talking about? You have no idea what you're talking about. Have you ever been choked out? No. Have you ever been in a UFC cage? No. It's just my thoughts. It's my ideas. It's my opinion. Joe Rogan would be like, what the? He wouldn't, the conversation would be over. If somebody came on Joe Rogan podcast and started talking about, the second show on a Friday night, it's not that bad. I don't know why comics, Steve Martin, publicly.
He thinks that the conversation, people have said things, way dumber things than that to Joe Rogan about things that he knows about. You think the conversation would be over if he said something? See, again, this is this weird manipulation where it's like, well, he would shut you down in this instance, so he should shut down other people when they're saying things, or just not have them on. That's what he should be doing. It's funny because I've been doing this show for a while, and you guys know I cover a lot of JRE on this channel, and so many people have been in comments years ago. Sometimes here and there, I don't know, there's hundreds of thousands of comments, but I've seen comments where people are like, oh, Joe Rogan's a gatekeeper. The gatekeeper. What they're looking for him to do right now is be a gatekeeper, because he's actually not. Maybe a comedy gatekeeper, but not really, because he doesn't have control over YouTube. He doesn't have control over Netflix. He doesn't have control over who can go to an open mic over and over and over again and become something. He just doesn't have that ability. He can't do that. Maybe with his club he can do that, but he can't do that. There's a comedy club right beside his comedy club. There's one across the street, and you can go and kill it in all those clubs if you want. There's not a damn thing he could do about it. But I'm just saying, right now, what they want is for him to be a gatekeeper. They want him to censor certain people that are talking about certain things.
He wrote in his book, I don't know why you guys always complain about the second show Friday night. Have you ever been on stage second show Friday night? No. But have you ever done comedy? No. But he wouldn't entertain that. Churchill, World War II, Jews, Gaza, genocide, anything goes on Joe Rogan. It's irresponsible. You wouldn't have these sort of floating conversations or ideas about MMA because you're an expert on it. You know it. You live it. You created it. You've done it. Stand-up comedy, same. You wouldn't let people come in there and tell you about how a joke this and what it's like performing on the road versus different between performing in a theater, which is different from performing in an arena. You wouldn't let anybody have a conversation about it unless.
This is it's so unhinged. This guy's the worst. It's such an unhinged type of view. You think Joe Rogan just shut you down. And here's the thing. Here's the premise. The real premise is, okay, let's say you at home were like Dave Smith. And you weren't an expert on stand-up comedy, but for some reason, you just sit around and you listen to stand-up comedy every single day, all the time. And you talk about stand-up comedy all the time. And you don't go to the clubs really, but you're always watching comedy. You're always staying up to date. You're actually watching YouTube videos about punchlines and callbacks and connecting threads and 5-minute sets and 10-minute sets. And you're really studying stand-up comedy. And you're really watching documentaries. And you're really digging your hands into stand-up comedy all the time, like on a crazy level. You're watching ridiculousness. You're watching Eddie Murphy. You're back into Pryor. You're finding Lenny Bruce sets. You're talking about all this stuff, and you're taking a lot of it in. And now you know a lot about it. Of course, he would hear you out in your conversation. The premise he's leading with is that Dave Smith Ian Carroll, etc., know absolutely nothing, and they're just talking off the top of their heads. And that's not what's happening. You're not fooling us with this anymore. I'm not even listening to the rest of this clip. We're moving on to Douglas Murray, where he talks about being quite gentle with Joe Rogan. He didn't want to manhandle him on the podcast. It's very interesting.
I mean, Joe's a friend, and I was trying to be gentle with him about what I regard as being a dangerous tilt that he and some other podcasters are encouraging. What I really maybe should have said then, can now, is that everybody recognizes expertise in the areas they know about. And for instance, if you had gone on Joe Rogan and sought to spend 3 hours talking about MMA fighting,
wouldn't be very convincing.
You notice him and Michael Rapaort have that's the same talking point. If you went on there and you talked about MMA, the exact same talking point. I didn't even catch that when I brought up those two clips. They have the same talking point. There's something going on. Something weird is going on right now.
That's my guess. I mean, it may surprise me, but I would think that quite early on he would work out that you didn't really know what you were talking about. And if you said, hey, I never said I'm an MMA expert, I just want to keep talking about it, then at some point they would have to call bullshit on you and they'd get very annoyed. Well, okay, that's the same with lots of other things. I get very annoyed when I hear people who are in no way recognizably historians, in no way recognizably expert in the subjects they talk about, regurgitating false versions of history that I saw debunked already in my lifetime. I mean, there's an area of the American right which is at the moment simply reheating David Irvingism. Well, we saw that off 30 years ago.
We already decided that's not worth talking about. So anybody else who's bringing it up is not worth listening to. I don't know, man. I don't know what's going on. And then I see like an account like this Billboard Chris guy. He's like, poor form from Joe Rogan mocking Douglas Murray. And it's like, this guy mocks people every single day. That's what his brand's built on. And for some reason, he's now saying Joe Rogan shouldn't be doing it. He literally goes around wearing signs, going to places where he knows that the signs will be a form of mockery to the people there. And we all love it. We go, wow, this is great. You know? And then people said they didn't like what he was saying, and he called them all neo-Nazis. Wow. Oh, man. So who's a part of the woke right again? I'm so unclear on that. Who's a part of the woke right again? Very interesting. But yeah, that's what's going on with Joe Rogan's podcast. I love the fact that he's mocking Douglas Murray. That needs to be done. Somebody needs to do that, of course. And yeah, I'm glad he did it. And I hope he does it more, because it was so crazy. I wish I could hear what he actually thought of him, because he kept it together like he always does. But I would love to know the conversation that him and Dave Smith had, or him and Jamie had after that podcast. And again, when you go back to this clip of Douglas Murray talking, this was a planned thing. I tried to be gentle. So this was not a random, like, oh, we're just going to have two people on. This guy wanted this to happen. And now all of a sudden, all these attacks are going on. And now Michael Rapaort. And if it's all about Daryl Cooper was on a month ago. So where was all the talk then? And if there was talk then, why is it coming back now about the same stuff? And why are we acting like Joe Rogan only has people on that talk about one side of anything? In fact, he has people that talk on both sides. And in fact, me being an expert in JRE and the audience, I know that it infuriates a lot of us, because we tend to look at that as flip-flopping. A lot of people look at that as flip-flopping, fence-sitting. They actually want Rogan to go hard into one side. I don't know, man. Anyway, when it comes to what's his name, Carmelo Anthony, let's jump over here just so there's a picture of him. Is it Carmelo? Is that what it is? Yep, it is. With a K. Yeah. Well, that's his legal defense there. That's ridiculous. I'm not going to hear Jasmine Crockett. I just wanted to pull up a picture. So when it comes to this kid, and if you don't know, this kid ended up stabbing this kid in the heart. And I say kid because I think they're both about 16 years old. So this guy passed away. This guy got brought in. His bond was $1 million. It got reduced down to $250,000 after the judge realized they had gathered up from GoFundMe or Give Send Go about $500,000. Then this guy's family took the remainder of that money and rented out a very like an $800 house, or they might have even leased it or bought it. A very expensive house in a nice area, cars, things like that, like pretty much just like BLM style. And you know, my thoughts on this are really that sometimes there's too much society, too much culture on your brain, and it gets in a little too far, and you start thinking that you can just do certain things or say certain things or act certain ways. And I feel like that's what happened to this kid. I really do. I don't know if he was a nice kid or if he's a bad kid or what, and I don't know the same about this kid either. But the fact that you were at school, and if you don't know the story, you're at school, you're at a track meet, you're 16, and you bring a knife in your bag, you put it in your bag. And then when this kid comes to you and says, hey, you have to leave our tent. We're talking about a tent. This is such a 16-year-old matter, you know, where it should have just been a couple of punches, maybe, you know, a couple of, you know, a tussle. And then that's the end of it. That's what it should have been. But this guy brought a knife. And his stance was, touch me and see what happens. So he was ready upon being touched to actually do what he did to this guy and have this guy pass away in his brother's arms, his twin brother's arms. I honestly, if it gets ruled self-defense, okay, fine. But for me, right now, I think this kid needs to go to jail. Now, I'm not saying go to jail until he's 55 years old or something like that, but he needs to sit down somewhere. Sometimes, especially with young black men that aren't being reared properly, you need to sit down and think about what you're doing. And the situation that's arisen here has made it so he doesn't have to sit down and think about what he did. He just knows that if he does what he did, which is unalive somebody, if a life is lost at his hands, he knows there will be a community of people who will support him, that will give him money, that will give him legal defense, that he might be able to actually help his parents with house and car and things like that. He only knows now that when he does a heinous act like this, good things come from it. That's the wrong message to send to a kid. He needs to sit down for a while. Maybe 3, maybe I don't know. I couldn't say how long, but he needs to go in and sit down for a while in one of those facilities. Maybe not with hardened, you know, federal type people, because that's terrible. But he needs to sit down for a while. He needs to not be with everybody in society for a while until he gets his head straight and realizes he can't just do things like that. And not even can. He shouldn't do things like that. Again, this guy's passed away in his brother's arms. There's videos of his mom crying. His dad is a Christian, so his dad actually forgave him right away. People are mad at the dad on this kid's side and on this kid's side. People who are on, and his name's Austin, people who are on Austin's side of things, they say the dad's being too weak, too soft. People on his side, this guy's side, Carmelo's, are saying that the dad's being disrespectful because he wanted to attend one of the press conferences where he would be, because he wanted to pray with the boy and pray with his family because he forgave him. And then, honestly, I think there's another layer of something happening here where this is being positioned to divide and conquer. That's what I have to say about the kid. That's what I think about this situation. He needs to sit down. Then I think there's another layer, a little tinfoil layer, where there's a little bit of divide and conquer happening. Every time things are going too good for too long, they take a situation like this and they blow it up on every single account and video and this and that. They put it everywhere. They put it in people's face. It enrages people. And the next thing you know, the divide has come once again. Just after Trump brought together blacks, whites, Latinos, men, women, Jewish people, Muslim people, Christians, just as Trump has brought those people together, just months later, as the Democrats are scrambling to figure out what to do, this happens. And the divide happens once again. And now there are, I'm just saying, again, as I said, this is the tinfoil part. Now the Dems have this guy as a face to focus on. Now they can reel in those people. Hey, man, come on. You know you've been with us. I'm just saying. But yeah, at the end of the day, this kid needs to sit down for a little while. It's a very, very sad situation. But I just wanted to talk about that really quick because I don't know if Rogan's going to touch on it. With everything he has going on, he probably doesn't want to bring up this topic and touch on it because no matter what he says, people are just going to jump on him. So anyway, that's it. I'm out.